Hi everyone, Araminta from the Cwicly team. I've just finished designing a pricing element, and I think a few of you would like it. Let's take a look. I went for a simple look, but what I find makes this pricing a little more interesting is the frosted glass effect. So if you're interested in designing this pricing element with a twist, keep on watching. Here we are in the Gutenberg editor with a blank page. Let's add a section. I'm going to add my background image by going into the Advanced tab, into the background panel, and clicking on the image background type and selecting cover in the size options, which fills the space as opposed to contain, which would make the background image fit the section, which would maybe result in blank spaces. I'm doing this now because my paragraphs and columns are white, so it will be easier to design on a colored background. Let's now add our header and center it in our section using Flex properties. We'll use column as a direction, because it will place our blocks on top of each other instead of the row direction that has the blocks next to each other. And also make it flex start in order for it to be on the left. We can add and define its font size, which in our case is 66 pixels. We mustn't forget to define the section's typography in the Advanced tab. I chose Encode Sans. We can also define our text color in the section. Both the font and color are defined in a section instead of individually on every block, because I want every text element to look the same. I find this header too bold, so I'll tone it down by changing the font weight to 300. It's now time to add our columns that constitute the pricing element. Before we add any block, we can choose the column direction and align it using Flex Start and justifying it in the center. Let's add a paragraph with a font size of 17 pixels and capitalize it with the transform property. I can then add my H2 header with a font size of 30 pixels, again capitalizing with the transform property. Then we will add our div that will contain the price. I chose to use a div because I wanted to stylize the pricing by having our numbers stand out against the letters and make it easily readable. In the div element, we can choose the row direction and center it. Then we can add a paragraph with a font size of 25 pixels. Let's copy this paragraph by using the Cwicly linking feature, which allows you to have one main block that controls the style of other blocks. Let's open the copy-paste menu and select Copy Paragraph Linked and add our text. This is a great time saver feature where we can tweak the first paragraph and it will directly change our linked paragraph. The last element to be added in our div is the paragraph containing the numbers. We can give it a font size of 100 pixels to stand out. Let's move it up. I chose to break up the look of the pricing with a separator. We can achieve this look by using a div and going into the Advanced tab, into the Container Sizing panel, giving it a height of 1 pixel and a width of 100%. This div needs a color, so let's head to the Background tab and select white with an opacity of 30%. We will now add our list element. You could achieve this with paragraph blocks, but we want to go quickly. We can define the font size in the typography panel at 18 pixels and capitalize it. Let's go into the spacing panel and let's apply a margin between the elements of 10 pixels. Lastly, change our list bullets to a circle for a different look. The last element to add is our button. We can quickly give it a font size of 18 pixels in the typography panel and capitalize it. Let's add our dark brown color that matches nicely with our background image. This small square button isn't very appealing, so let's change it in the Spacing tab by unlinking the padding. Let's give it a top and bottom padding of 15 pixels and 55 pixels on either side. It still looks a bit too boxy for my taste, so let's give it a rounded border by going into the Borders panel and giving it a border radius of 30 pixels. Don't forget to define your button as a link. This button feels a bit boring without a hover effect, so let's easily change that by going into hover mode and adding a lighter brown to the background color. Once we're back in normal mode, we mustn't forget to add a transition effect that helps make the transition to our hover color more seamless. We can find this effect in the Advanced tab, in the Effects panel, and then in the Transition panel. I will give it a duration of 0.4 seconds. Every block has been added to our design, but now we need to make this design brief by adding margins. Firstly, our header is too close to our pricing element, so let's open the Advanced tab and go into the Margin and Padding panel. I added a bottom margin of 45 pixels. Next, our separator needs a bottom margin of 40 pixels. And lastly, a bottom margin of 35 pixels to the list. We can now add some padding to our column so that our elements are not so close to the borders that we're about to add. Let's add a 40 pixels padding. For our column's border, we can open the Borders panel. Let's add a border radius of 30 pixels for an overall rounded look. Then let's apply a solid border style and select a white border color with an opacity of 40 pixels. This border is much too present. Let's turn it down by defining our border width at 1 pixel. As you can see, for the moment, we only have one column that's complete. We don't want to copy and paste every block, which would be too time-consuming. Instead, let's copy this column with the Cwicly linking feature and replace the other columns. Now I will quickly fill in the text. If you notice, there's a gap between the columns which we don't want, so I will set the column and row gap to 0 pixel in the Grid Settings panel. I want my columns to have a border between them, so I will select the first column, go into the Advanced tab and into the Borders panel, select the solid border style, and exactly the same background color as our column's border. I have to unlink the border width property because I only want the border in between the first and second column. However, since my two columns are linked to my first, I must select the third column and unlink the border width property because I don't want the border on the right. So let's set it to 0 pixels. The last step for our pricing column is to add our long-awaited frosted glass effect that not only makes our pricing element more readable, but also brings this element to another level. Let's select our columns and navigate to the background panel. Let's select Image as a background type and open the Filters panel and apply a blur of 15 pixels. As you can see, the blur effect overflows and smudges our borders, but this isn't a problem. All you need to do is hide the overflow on the columns block in the Container Layout panel and voila! It may look good on the desktop view, but if we take a look at the tablet and mobile view, it's a disaster. So in the desktop view, let's select the columns block and scroll down to the grid settings and disable the auto grid property. This allows us to manually control the grid layout. So let's go into the tablet view and open the grid layout editor. We can add 4 columns. Then let's make the first 2 columns fill the space and make the third one fit in between them on the second row. It already looks better. All we need to add now is a 1 pixel width border in the third column to keep the columns element look consistent with the desktop view. Lastly, let's go into mobile view and fit 1 column per row. Our second column is lacking a border, so we can swiftly select the Advanced tab and the Border panel and unlink the border width element and add a 1 pixel border to the top. We can also quickly change our header's font size at 42 pixels for a more appropriate look. And there you have a functional pricing element that works for all 3 views. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned how to do my frosted glass trick, and see you in the next one.